The 1985 P. Kennedy half dollar is part of the long-running series first introduced in 1964 to honor President John F. Kennedy following his assassination, and by 1985 the coin had become not only a circulating denomination, although rarely seen in daily commerce by then, but also an object of interest for collectors, with the Philadelphia minted issue identified by its small P mint mark located on the obverse just above the date. Designed by Chief Engraver Gilroy Roberts, obverse, and Assistant Engraver Frank Gasparo, reverse, the coin features a left-facing bust of President Kennedy accompanied by the motto, "In God We Trust," the word Liberty, curving across the top, and the date 1985 at the bottom, while Gasparo's reverse displays the modified presidential coat of arms, often mistaken for a building or a library because of its dense details, consisting of a heraldic eagle with outstretched wings clutching an olive branch in its right talon and a bundle of arrows in its left, its breast covered by a shield and its beak holding a ribbon bearing the national motto, E Pluribus Unum, all surrounded by a ring of 50 stars symbolizing the states. By 1985, Kennedy halves were no longer struck for circulation in the numbers seen in earlier decades, and the 1985 P has a mintage of roughly 17 million pieces, making it common but still interesting due to its mid-1980s context, when the U.S. Mint produced half dollars mostly for collectors, banks, and armored car orders rather than everyday retail use. The coin is made of the standard copper-nickel clad composition adopted in 1971, outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, giving it a total weight of 11.34 grams, a diameter of 30.6 millimeters, and a reeded edge. Unlike the 1964 silver issue or the 1965 to 1970 40% silver versions, the 1985 P contains no silver, which influences both its numismatic value and metal value. In circulated condition, it is usually worth face value, although collectors often seek examples that are sharply struck, with clear definition in Kennedy's hair and the eagle's feathers, and in uncirculated grades, especially MS 65 and above. The coin can carry modest premiums because high-grade mid-1980s Kennedy halves are scarcer than their mintages suggest due to lower contemporary demand and storage habits. The coin also includes distinctive design elements, such as the small serifed font for "In God We Trust," the spacing of the letters a Liberty, and the established presidential shield style, all of which remain consistent, but exhibit striking variations when dies were worn or polished. Although the 1985 P. Kennedy half dollar rarely appears in change today and is sometimes overlooked, it stands as an accessible and historically engaging piece of U.S. coinage, representing the continuing legacy of the Kennedy series during an era when half dollars had nearly vanished from daily usage. The next top. The 1988 P. United States half dollar, part of the long-running Kennedy half dollar series, is a coin struck by the Philadelphia Mint that carries forward a rich blend of modern American history, national symbolism, and evolving coin use traditions. Although the Kennedy half dollar debuted in 1964 as a national memorial to President John F. Kennedy following his assassination, by the 1980s it had largely disappeared from everyday circulation, making many issues from that era, including the 1988 P, more familiar to collectors than to the general public. The obverse, designed by Chief Engraver Gilroy Roberts, displays a left-facing portrait of President Kennedy, rendered with smooth, high-relief details that emphasize his hair, profile, and determined expression. This portrait is accompanied by the inscriptions Liberty, arched around the top rim, In God We Trust, split across the lower left and right fields, and the year 1988 centered beneath the bust. Because it was minted at Philadelphia, the coin bears the small P mint mark tucked just above the date, marking it as part of the continued post-1980 practice of Philadelphia using mint marks on all denominations except the cent. On the reverse, designed by sculptor, engraver Frank Gasparo, is a modified version of the presidential seal, a heraldic eagle with an outstretched shield on its chest, holding an olive branch in its right talon to symbolize peace, and a bundle of arrows in its left talon to represent strength and readiness to defend the nation. Surrounding the eagle are 50 tiny stars representing the states, along with the inscriptions United States of America across the top and $50 at the bottom. Above the eagle's head flows a banner inscribed with the national motto, E pluribus unum, meaning out of many, one, an expression of unity and diversity that has appeared on American coinage for generations. Like all regular-issue $50 minted after 1971, the 1988 P-piece is made of a copper-nickel-clad composition, consisting of outer layers of copper-nickel alloy bonded to a pure copper core, giving the coin a bright silver color without containing any actual silver. It has a diameter of 30.6 millimeters, a weight of 11.34 grams, and a reeded edge, continuing the standard specifications introduced with the clad series. Although billions of Kennedy halves were produced between 1964 and the early 1970s, mintages became lower in later years as public usage declined, yet the 1988 P mintage remained relatively high, tens of millions, because the U.S. Mint still struck them for commerce, banking distribution, and collector demand. In terms of the coin's physical appearance, examples that circulated lightly often display contact marks and duller luster because clad coins wear more visibly than silver blends. Meanwhile, uncirculated pieces exhibit the sharp, satiny surface typical of late 1980s minting quality, though fully brilliant. Sharply struck examples can be scarcer due to inconsistent striking pressure and common bag marks from high-volume production. Collectors typically evaluate 1988 P $50 not for rarity, but for condition and strike quality, since most standard-grade pieces remain common and inexpensive. High-grade mint state examples, especially those graded MS 66 or higher, are more desirable because relatively few survive without the chatter, abrasions, and weak strikes that many Philadelphia minted clad halves display. The historical value of the 1988 P $50 lies partly in representing an era when the Kennedy $50 shifted from an everyday workhorse coin of the 1960s to a largely symbolic and commemorative presence by the late 20th century. Even though the coin contains neither precious metal nor major rarity, it still carries the full symbolic weight of the Kennedy design, which for many Americans represents ideals of service, national unity, and the poignant legacy of a young president whose life was cut short. The inscriptions Liberty, In God We Trust, and E Pluribus Unum together emphasize the traditional mottos featured on U.S. coinage, tying the piece to both the founding principles and the nation's modern identity. For numismatists, the 1988 P $50 also marks one of the standard production years before the mint drastically reduced circulation strikes in the 2000s, making it a snapshot of the coin's continuing but diminishing role in regular commerce. While it does not possess special varieties, silver content, or unusual mint errors in typical cases, examples with off-center strikes, double dies, or planchet errors can command collector interest and higher values. As part of the broader Kennedy $50 series, the 1988 P coin remains a meaningful artifact of American cultural memory, representing not only the legacy of John F. Kennedy and the artistry of mid-20th century engraving, but also the way U.S. circulating coinage evolved over time, adapting to new materials, changing monetary habits, and shifts in national symbolism, all encapsulated in a single, everyday, copper-nickel coin that continues to resonate with collectors and history enthusiasts alike. The next top. The 1992 P United States $50, often referred to as a Kennedy $50, represents a continuation of one of the most iconic and emotionally significant coin series in modern American numismatics. First introduced in 1964 as a national tribute to President John F. Kennedy following his assassination in November 1963, the design of the $50 quickly became a symbolic piece of American history, and the 1992 P issue is part of that long-standing tradition. Struck at the Philadelphia Mint, identified by the P mint mark, the coin carries forward the same central design elements that millions of collectors and citizens associate with honor, remembrance, and national identity. The obverse features the portrait of John F. Kennedy designed by Gilroy Roberts, showing the late president facing left with a dignified, forward-looking expression that conveys both youthfulness and strength. Above his head arcs the word liberty, a foundational principle emphasized on nearly all American coinage, while the motto, "In God We Trust," appears on the lower portion of the obverse, underscoring the nation's long-standing spiritual and philosophical identity. Beneath the portrait is the date 1992, which places this specific coin within the early 1990s era of U.S. minting, a time when half dollars were no longer widely used in everyday circulation but still produced for collectors, casino demand, and limited distribution. On the reverse, Frank Gasparo's depiction of the presidential seal dominates the design, an intricately detailed heraldic eagle holding an olive branch of peace in one talon, and a bundle of arrows symbolizing military readiness in the other. Above the eagle's head floats a field of stars and rays that give the reverse a sense of grandeur and authority. Surrounding the central image are the inscriptions, "United States of America," across the upper perimeter and "half dollar" along the lower rim, while the motto "E pluribus unum," meaning out of many one, is displayed on a banner held in the eagle's beak. This phrase, rooted deeply in the American national story, reflects the unity of diverse states and peoples into one republic, reminding collectors and historians that each coin embodies more than just metal. It represents an idea. The 1992 P half dollar, like others of the era, is composed of a copper-nickel-clad alloy, having transitioned away from the 40% silver composition used for special strikes, ending in 1970. The clad composition consists of outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, resulting in the familiar silver-gray color and moderate weight of about 11.34 grams. Although this composition lacks the precious metal value that earlier half dollars possessed, it ensures durability for circulation and keeps the coin consistent with modern production standards. In terms of mintage, the Philadelphia Mint produced tens of millions of half dollars in the early 1990s, though most of these never saw heavy circulation because the denomination had largely fallen out of daily transactional use. Consequently, many 1992 P examples survive in high grade, and while they are not rare in typical uncirculated condition, collectors still seek them for Dayton Mintmark sets or for the historic significance linked to President Kennedy and late 20th century minting trends. Some coins from this year may exhibit minor die varieties, strike differences, or condition-based variations that slightly influence collector value, though the most important aspects remain the design and historical continuity of the series. When examining a 1992 P half dollar, collectors often look closely at the sharpness of Kennedy's hair, the clarity of lettering on both sides, and any signs of luster, contact marks, or discoloration. Well-preserved examples show strong cartwheel luster and crisp detail across the eagle's feathers on the reverse. Beyond technical grading, the coin carries cultural and historical meaning. It exists as a piece of American memory, connecting living generations to the legacy of President Kennedy and to the broader narrative of U.S. civic ideals. The motto, "In God We Trust," echoes the spiritual character acknowledged since its first appearance on coins in the 19th century, while liberty and E pluribus unum unite the concepts of freedom and unity. Together, these inscriptions represent the fundamental values embedded in American life and referenced through everyday objects such as coins. For many people, holding a Kennedy half dollar, even one as common as the 1992 P issue, feels like holding a small, tangible reflection of the country's past and present. Whether kept in a collection, passed among family members, preserved as a keepsake, or simply appreciated for its artistry, the 1992 P half dollar stands as more than a piece of currency. It is a continuation of a national tribute, a preserved moment of minting history, and a durable emblem of identity, unity, and remembrance within the story of the United States, the next top. The 2001 D United States of America half dollar, part of the long-running Kennedy half dollar series, is a coin struck by the Denver Mint, identifiable by the D Mint mark that appears on the obverse beneath President John F. Kennedy's portrait, and like all coins of its type produced since 1971. It is composed of a copper-nickel-clad alloy consisting of outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, resulting in a total weight of 11.34 grams, a diameter of 30.61 millimeters, and a reeded edge. Its obverse, designed by Gilroy Roberts, features the left-facing portrait of President Kennedy, first introduced in 1964 soon after his assassination, and includes the inscriptions Liberty around the upper rim, In God We Trust placed in front of Kennedy's neck, and the date 2001 beneath the portrait, while the reverse, executed by Frank Asparo, displays the heraldic presidential coat of arms, consisting of a highly detailed eagle with outstretched wings, a shield on its chest, an olive branch in its right talon symbolizing peace, and a bundle of arrows in its left talon representing strength and readiness to defend the nation. Above the eagle appears the curved banner bearing E Pluribus Unum, out of many one, a traditional motto of the United States, while the outer rim carries the inscriptions United States of America at the top and $50 at the bottom, all struck in a bold, raised lettering, with 50 surrounding stars representing the 50 states, giving the reverse its famous presidential seal look. Although $50 once circulated commonly, by 2001 they were produced mainly for numismatic distribution because general public demand for the denomination had significantly declined in the 1980s and 1990s, meaning that in 2001 most coins were minted in smaller quantities and sold directly to collectors rather than widely released into everyday commerce, with the 2001 D specifically having a relatively low mintage compared with earlier decades, making it somewhat more desirable, especially in higher grades such as Mint State, MS, 65 and above. Even though circulated examples remain common and inexpensive, the coin's placement of In God We Trust continues a tradition that dates to the mid-19th century and was carried over into the Kennedy series without interruption, while the motto, E Pluribus Unum, on the reverse reflects the historical ideal of unity among diverse states and peoples, a concept symbolically reinforced by the eagle clutching both the olive branch and arrows, which together communicate peace maintained through strength. The Denver Mint in 2001 employed high-speed modern presses to produce the coins in bright, sharply detailed strikes, and those preserved in uncirculated condition often show strong luster and clean surfaces, though many pieces, especially ones obtained from bags or rolls, may display light contact marks from automated handling, a common occurrence for modern clad coinage. As a collectible, the 2001 D $50 remains accessible for new hobbyists, yet interesting for more advanced numismatists, because its limited mintage marks one of the years when $50 production significantly decreased, symbolizing the transition of the series into a primarily collector-oriented coin rather than a widely circulating denomination. The overall artistry of the coin, from the dignified portrait of Kennedy to the intricate, deeply symbolic reverse design, continues to make the 2001 D an appealing piece for anyone interested in American history, presidential iconography, and modern U.S. minting practices, and while it contains no silver and therefore holds minimal intrinsic metal value, its historical significance, limited distribution, and enduring design have given it a quiet but distinct place in the larger story of American coinage.